want to thank Region 8 Sai organization for bringing us all the wonderful experiences and wisdoms from Sai Baba devotees, and of course, the beautiful music. You know, I'm often asked when I met Sai Baba, and I answer that I met him on my first trip to India in 1975. But looking back in time, most of us realize that Swami has been a part of our lives since the very beginning. He seems to be constantly interacting with us, sometimes in a serious moment, and at other times with humor and play. My first experience of his presence and his awareness or acknowledgement of me, a child of 9, occurred during World War II. My father was serving in Saipan and Iwo Jima, and we were anxious for his safety. One Sunday in church, the story of Joseph and his relationship with God was retold. There was an emphasis on God answering Joseph's questions through dreams. I was struck by this exciting form of communication. That evening, instead of my usual prayers, I explained to God that if he could answer Joseph's questions in dreams, then he could answer mine also. My 2 questions were, will my father come back from the war, and does God really exist? That night, I had a powerful vision dream. The energy of love and light was so intense that I woke up shaking from its effect. In the dream, there were many symbols, 3 of which I was later to see in the same pastel colors on the temple at Puttaparthi, my first trip to India. After the dream, I immediately rushed to my mother and told her the good news. My father was coming back from the war, and there really was a God. Unfortunately, in those days, parents did not want their children to be different. And so her response was that it was just a dream, and she went on with her chores. Her attitude was difficult for me to understand, but I learned then not to tell anyone of my experiences. My father did return from the war, and I knew God was real. And indeed, I was later to meet him in India. The following year, another experience occurred when I was sitting in a circle of Girl Scouts. My friend turned a cartwheel in front of me, and her shoe caught me right behind the ear with a strong blow to my head. I went sailing out of my body, up and up into a beautiful path. There was a wonderful light ahead of me, and I knew it was God, and I was going home to him. I could hear my mother calling me, but I paid no attention to her. I was rushing forward to God and bliss. Suddenly, 2 beings in white appeared on the path, and I could not get around them. They said nothing, but filled me with so much love. I knew I had to go back. Turning, I saw my small body and wondered how I should ever get into it. But suddenly I was there. I told no one about this, but later, as an adult in California, I read about the out-of-body experiences and knew that this was what I had experienced. Those 2 occurrences, plus a few others, early in life kept me searching for the truth and higher dimensions of thought. But I began to find that the problem in having moments of bliss and different states of awareness leaves the normal events of life flat. There is a constant whispering undertone that says, not this, not this. It was not until 1960 that a more definite path opened up for me. I met a woman who introduced me to the philosophy of metaphysics, and I defined that as the study of reality and being. I felt that at last I had found my course of study, my reality, and like most searchers of truth, I entered a period of intense study. I read and attended classes in self-realization, theosophy, Vedanta, and astrology. I adopted the posture of do no harm and became a vegetarian. For several years, I studied under an enlightened teacher in Laguna Beach. When he passed away, I was devastated. I felt that a door to my progress had closed. I then made the decision to go back to school and finish my degrees. This decision would ultimately lead me to Sai Baba. Back in school, I took a required course in geology, and there was a young man in class who weakly kept changing his seat to get closer to me. I paid no attention as I was older and not interested. But one day he asked me to have lunch in the park next to the school. He seemed nice, so I decided to go for the hour. We chatted for a while, and I wondered if he might be interested in metaphysics. At that time, I had been reading a book called Dugmar the Egyptian, and that's spelled Dugmar. It's a story about a queen of Egypt. She had not been a nice person in life and was supposedly telling her story of the afterlife through a medium. True or not, it was an interesting book. I started relating the story of Dugmar to my new friend. He began to turn pale and looked confused. I asked him what was wrong. He said, "My name is Dugmar." I said, "No, Dugmar is the name of a queen of Egypt." Then he said, "My name is Dugmar," and he spelled it out, Dougmar. We sat there for a moment in stunned silence. At that point, we both knew that we were thrown together for some purpose, and we became close friends. 4 years later, we were married. On weekends before and after our marriage, Doug and I attended theosophy classes given by Camille Svensson. She had heard of a Sai Baba in India and decided to travel there. On her return, she was all aglow and definitely in love with this guru. She talked about his materializations of a Buddhi, holy ash, which sort of turned me off, but Doug was excited and wanted to go to India to check him out. Except for Doug's insistence, I don't think I would have ever traveled that far away from home, at least not at that time. Now, Doug was in real estate and said that if he got enough money to pay all the bills and buy tickets from his next sale, he was going to India and wanted me to come too. And indeed, the next sale produced the required amount almost to the penny. At the same time, in 1974, I had started teaching at the World University in Ojai, California. The founders, Dr. and Mrs. Reyes, had also heard of Sai Baba and decided to travel to India. Upon their return, they were so happy, and one could see a change in them. But Dr. Reyes complained that Swami had only given him a few packets of vibhuti and that it was not enough to share with all the students. A few days later, after a morning class, the Reyeses asked Doug and I for lunch at their home. When Dr. Reyes opened the door to his house, a cloud of ash greeted us. Searching for the source, none could be found. The fireplace flue was closed, all the windows were shut. Dr. Reyes began smelling the vibhuti and declared it, smelling the ash, and declared it to be vibhuti. I did not believe it and went to use the restroom. That door was closed and latched. But when I opened it, the small room was filled with ash. There was no way particles could have come into the room on their own. Sheepishly, I returned to the living room and helped to gather fragrant ash for the students. The following March, Doug and I left for India. We were guided by a Sai Baba devotee who was also going at that time. India's energies were brimming with colors, sights and sounds that I have never experienced. Fragrant flowers, spices, and bright saris vied for our attention. Camels, oxen, pedicabs, taxis, and buses all competed for road space. Overwhelmed and tired from the journey, I rested in a small hotel. But I was soon awakened by birds building a nest in the room. In the afternoon, we met Indra Devi, a longtime devotee of Sai Baba and well known for her U.S. books and teachings of yoga. She became our guide in the ashram and our friend during that stay there. On a Thursday afternoon, Guru Day, I sat in a circle of sand outside the temple with other ladies and waited for my first glimpse of Sai Baba. Doug sat on the men's side. Swami emerged from the temple and began to walk around the men's side. My heart seemed to leap forward at his great beauty and grace of movement. It wasn't the perfection of his features really, but a gentleness and lovingness that seemed to permeate the air around him. Still, I thought to myself that I would not be taken in until I knew if he was the real thing. Swami slowly came around to the lady's side and chatted with the lady beside me. Pausing momentarily in front of me, Sai Baba's gaze fell upon my person for an instant. I found myself looking through his eyes into a most profound state of being beyond the edge of my awareness. I could not hold on to that moment, but knew that this was the true reality. After a few days at the ashram, Indra Devi came to our room and told us we were to have an interview. I had come to ask Swami about self-realization and how to achieve it. I mentioned this to an older devotee, and she told me to write the question down before the interview and take it with me. I did not understand why, but did so. At last the day arrived, and after darshan, Swami told our group to go onto the porch of the temple and wait. Finally, the temple door opened, and Swami smiled, inviting us in. 8 or 9 of us settled around his chair, close to his energy. I was the last one to come through the door. Swami chatted a bit with an older devotee and then got up to give some vibhuti to everyone. I did not really want any, but wanting to be polite, I put my hands out to receive it. Swami gave some to everyone, but when he came to me, he started to walk away, and I quickly put my hands down. But then he turned back and asked sweetly, "Oh, did you want some?" He then put some on my forehead. I was a bit shocked that he had realized my hesitancy. Plus, being so close in his aura, one tends to rise above the mind a bit into another space. Swami then went around to the group and asked for questions. Doug seemed a bit tongue-tied but said something. Swami gave him some copper for his wallet and patted him on his back. As Sai Baba came around to me, I really couldn't remember how to phrase the question because of his energy, which was overwhelming. So I had to look at my note, and my question read, "How does one achieve self-realization?" Swami then gave a small discourse, and these are his beginning words. "The mind is like a cloth. Our thoughts are the cotton. The desires which they mold are the threads. The intermingling and the interaction of these desires are the mind, made up of warp and woof. When the threads are removed one by one, the cloth or mind disappears. It is best to have as few desires as possible." In a later discourse, he again stated the above, but he added, "Once it is realized that the mind is the cause of minus, my body, my mind, and that it is made of desires, then one will strive to achieve the state of samadhi in which all agitations of the mind cease." Now, we had arrived in India at the time of Shivaratri and had the rare opportunity of attending the Abhishekam and the Lingam ceremonies along with massive crowds in the summer heat. I knew that I loved Swami, but I did not plan on returning to India and his heat. But after being in the U.S. a while, the longing to be with him again became stronger than my comfort zones. So from 1975 to 1980, we were able to go to India several times a year to be with Swami and listen to his divine discourses. During that period of time, many Westerners were discovering him. We, the Westerners, had interviews, dinners, and music programs with Sai Baba in attendance. In the summers, there was summer school with Swami as the teacher. Swami was instructive, loving, and even playful with us during those years. On some occasions, I took pen and paper to take notes, but soon gave that up. The emanating bliss was so strong, everybody wanted to just sit back and be in it and with it. I am so grateful for those precious moments. Back in the United States in the late 70s, Doug and another Baba devotee, Lenny Madeline, decided to form a U.S. music group. Lenny, a talented musician, wanted to create Indian Western bhajans and put them on a recording. They were all to be, of course, devotional songs. He invited musicians from several U.S. cities to participate. We had just purchased a large house, which soon filled up with musicians, their equipment, and a mattress sound room. No one had much money, but we pooled our resources to pay the utilities and buy food. Lenny created many beautiful bhajans at that time. At your feet, dear Lord, we pray, was one of them, and has been a favorite of devotees for many years now. Our group is called Sharanam, Surrender. We also produced a children's recording directed by Marty Wilson called Where God Shines Through. Towards the end of the project, the phone was cut off for lack of payments, and many of the musicians were getting cranky. My bhajan to sing was Murali Krishna with a flute obligato. It was the last one to be recorded. But the day it was to be done, the flutist left over some disagreement. We did not know what to do. No one knew of a flutist who might do it, and then there was the question of money and so forth. We all went to bed depressed. The following morning, I went downstairs to discover a pipe had broken in the lower bathroom and water was everywhere. Someone volunteered to go for a payphone and call a plumber, but another person picked up our phone and got a dial tone. Quickly, we called the closest plumber available who could come on the same day. We got a hold of a young man who was able to fix the pipe. He then looked around at all the instruments and asked what we were doing. Doug bemoaned the fact that we had no flute player, and the plumber said, "I play the flute." And so, miraculously, a beautiful lyric overlay was added. The recording, then completed, was sent to Dick Bach for mixing. Lenny then took the tapes to India, and Swami accepted them on a day that celebrates music in India. This is my favorite story of Swami's love and leelas. On another visit to India, Sai Baba called some of the Westerners in for an interview. We sat on the temple porch while he was making his darshan rounds. I kept wondering what I should ask him if I got the chance. I decided to ask him about my daughter with whom I was having problems. But then I changed my mind and decided to go for the ultimate question of samadhi. At that time, I really had not grasped the whole oneness thing, but knew I never wanted to be separated from him. The interview door finally opened and we all filed in. The first thing Swami did was to tell me about my daughter before I asked any question at all. I was really dumbfounded, and later when leaving the interview, I said to Dr. Gokak, "Swami just read my mind." "No," he said, "Swami is telling you he is you." At that time, this went over my head, but later became very important to me as I moved more and more to an Advaita oneness understanding. An important note here is that Swami cautions knowing is not being. During the same interview, Swami talked to all of us for a while, but then invited a few couples into a small room for questions. When it was our turn, my husband asked Swami about a piece of property he wanted to sell. If Doug sold it, Doug, intended to give up his job and become a writer, which was his goal at that time. Swami told him several times not to sell the property, but Doug could not give up the idea and asked Swami what he should sell it for. Swami finally gave him a figure, but later the property did not sell and we lost it. As the interview was drawing to a close, There had not been an opening for me to ask my question. So I blurted out, Swami, can I merge with you or Samadhi? Swami said, not now, later. This promise has been my security through life. As Swami rose from his chair, signaling the end of the private interview, I immediately went to the door so as not to block Swami's path. But just as I reached it, I felt such a great and intense love from behind me that I turned around to see Swami lifting his robe for us to take Padnamaskar. Returning to California, Doug indeed left his job and began writing even though the property did not sell. He wrote some lovely poems to Swami, and on one occasion during a large celebration in India, he was asked to read them on stage. I led a bhajan with some other ladies. At the same event, Maynard Ferguson, jazz musician, played his trumpet. Maynard really rocked out. The more traditional Indian ladies looked horrified at the sound, but Swami seemed to love it and tapped and swayed to the music. During that same trip, in a brief interview, Doug asked Swami if he, Sai Baba, would publish his poems. Swami indicated that he would, and that he would do it in Bangalore. We then went back to Whitefield Ashram near Bangalore, where Sai Baba was supposed to come, but he never came, and we had to leave for home. Now, most devotees are familiar with Swami's tomorrows. A promised event may be by Western time, or it may be much later. Whether this is to develop our patience and trust or in him, or whether the avatar is not under the illusion of time, I don't know. But Doug did not have the patience and was deeply disappointed. Also, his books and poems were not accepted in the States. Complications began to arise when Doug found another guru, a woman who channeled information from spirit world. She taught that since we are all God, we can do anything we want to do. Naturally, this appealed to quite a few people, but it is just the opposite of many Indian and Western teachings, certainly against what Sai Baba taught. Of course, this was the beginning of the end for Doug and I. I decided to move to Ojai, California at that time, and at that time there was little affordable housing. But due to the large Sai Baba community there, I was able to find work and a place to stay. I continued teaching at the World University, in which Sai Baba was now its chancellor. It was a scary time for me. I had never been completely on my own. I depended on Swami then for absolutely everything. It was unclear in my mind as to whether my current situation was payback from previous karma, or how long Swami would let me go down this path before things improved. But I settled into a regular rhythm of life and was content. One day, a friend called me. She was moving and was having a vegetarian potluck for friends who had helped her move. She said that one was a very nice man and thought I should meet him. I declined. I had my work, was attending the Ojai Sai Baba Center, and was meeting my bills. Also, I was not interested in another relationship and was at the point of middle age. But she insisted, so I said I would go. At that dinner, I met Richard Dixon. He had just read his first book about Sai Baba and had had a dream about Sai Baba. In the dream, Swami was at the beach with a circle of devotees around him. Richard then prayed to Swami that he be in that inner circle. Years later, during an interview with Sai Baba, Richard noticed that the vibhuti he received from Swami was very grainy, like sand, and he remembered his earlier dream. Richard and I were married in November in 1984 and were together until he passed away in 2004. We were able to travel to India during that time twice. The last interview we had as a couple was 2003. We had gone back to my childhood home in Maryland to take care of my widowed mother until she passed away. We attended a wonderful Sai Baba center there, and we formed a choir that sang on numerous occasions. The center had planned a trip to India in 2003, a few months after Mother left her body. So Richard and I were able to make the trip to India with them. Swami called our group in on Mother's Day. He spoke to us for a while and then made vibhuti for everyone. At the end of the interview, Swami got up to leave the room, but he must have felt unstable in his step. He said to Richard, who was sitting by the door, "Steady me." Richard put out his hand for Swami to hold, and Swami said to him, "I will see you tomorrow." 9 months later, Richard unexpectedly passed. It was on Makara Sankranti, the day the sun turns north. I understand that to leave the body on that day is auspicious and signifies the end of the cycle of birth and death. It was a great comfort to me, even in my grief, knowing that Richard had held Swami's hand and that Swami was there for him. In the fall of the same year, I returned to India to spend quiet time at the ashram. I traveled with a friend and again with the Maryland group. Many of the choir members were also making the trip. After settling in at the ashram for a few days, Swami sent someone to our trip leader and asked us to form a choir with a British group there. We were to present it at Darshan in a few weeks. There were many experiences and leelas during that time, far too many for this short talk, but we worked hard and we got it together. We presented our program to Swami and a large gathering of devotees in the ashram one afternoon. It seemed to be well received. Later, Swami invited the ladies from the choir for an interview. There were 18 or so, a large group for the small receiving room. This was the last time I would be with Swami that closely. He began the conversation by saying that the ladies sang well, but the men not so much. And this made everyone laugh. One of the bhajans in the program was Swami Take My Hand, and during the interview, one choir member asked if he, Swami, would hold our hands, which Swami allowed. This had also been a childhood wish of mine, to hold God's hand. At the end of the hour, he let each of us take the namaskar. We were overwhelmed by his presence and grace. During the interview, Sai Baba asked our group for questions, and here are some of the comments that he made regarding them. Question: how can we take you to our homes? Answer: I am always there, pointing to his heart. Think of me, then think a little more, then think deeply. I will come. I am in every one of you. Question. Please show me your divinity. Answer. Divinity is not matter. It has to be experienced. Feel it. Do sadhana, spiritual practices, and you will feel it. Question. You never come to me in my dreams anymore. I am afraid you have forgotten me. Answer. Why do you say dream? Why do you say dream? I am always with you. Question. Can we modify our karma? Answer. Don't worry. Past is past. Live in the present. It is not an ordinary presence. It is omnipresence. Past is past. Good thoughts, good deeds, good karma. Then Swami asked us, who am I? We came up with many answers, Guru, Avatar, Rama, etc. No, he said to all of us, I am your father. I continued to return to India over the next 6 years to absorb its peace and inner guidance. I was fortunate to be there in 2009 and 2010 before Swami left his body in 2011. During those years, Swami emphasized one thing. He repeatedly told us there is only one, not two, only one. This again made it clear to me that the principle of God and soul are the same, and that all are truly one, or Advaita. In this life, I have experienced that for which I sought, and though I cannot maintain it steadily, I am content in knowing that it is, and that it is one. Soham, 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 I am that, I am that, I am that. I have, before I close, I would like to tell you about one little experience that I overlooked in our group together. I was in a group in India in the 70s, and Swami made a ring for someone standing next to me. I was about 3 feet away from him, and he held his hand open like this all the time. I first noticed a little bit of sparkle in the palm, then a fourth of a ring, then a half of a ring, and then 75% of a ring, and then he caught it. That was an amazing and open experience of seeing him create. Before I close, I would like to answer a question that I received. The question was, what is my sadhana? Sai Baba asked that same question in darshan one day. He came over to me and said, what are you doing for sadhana? At the time, I was using my mala, and I asked Swami, should I do beads? Swami said, yes, do beads. And so I continue to use them. I go to my altar twice a day, early in the morning, and also later in the evening, sometimes even when I don't feel like it. I go there because it is my agreed time with God, and it helps to create a continuum of energy and thought without a break through the day. I do a set list of Gayatri and prayer. I usually play the Ridram to quiet my mind, and I found 2 other things which help me practicing the presence during the day. and I try to be very honest with myself. I don't always succeed, of course, but I remember a Swami quote, "All effort counts." So, which I find very comforting. Jai Sai Ram.
Saira, Mary, that was absolutely wonderful and fascinating. And I just love the stories where the divine and God brings a devotee slowly closer and closer over the period of one's life. You've had, over the course of your life, you've had so many glimpses of the divine and even sat at the Lord's feet. And it seems that those glimpses were really there to reinforce perhaps a truth that you already knew, that about being one with God. And we know, of course, that Baba says, "I am God, but so are you." And I was hoping that you might be able to further describe the idea of self-realization and what it means to you, and the concept of the devotee and God being one.
Well, for one thing, I think it made a huge difference in moving a bit away from the personality. Because once you have a moment, even a little moment of divinity, which can be looking at a sunset, it can be that moment when you forget where you are and who you are, and you begin to note a very big difference between the facade that you use and who you really are. So I think we all just keep working on that. It takes forever. It just every little moment that we can seek out in our daily routines to think about Swami, or a special little memory or a song of him. Sometimes if we expand on that for a few more seconds, it allows us to be one with him.